Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday. If you are following me on social media, TikTok, Instagram, here on Facebook, then you know that I have been sick now for 10 days. Um, yeah, no fun at all. So, anyway, today we're going to talk about the quilt that actually broke me. So let me just take 1 second. I just want to get all of my stuff together here. Um, if you're just joining me, why don't you leave it in the chat or the comments where you're joining me from? I always like to see who is the furthest away. Always something that's fun. So I've been on a roll lately as far as wanting people to get their UFOs done, right? Again, I think that most people don't get their UFOs done because they don't know what they're going to quilt on it. So I do want you to hop over to my Facebook, not my Facebook page. Yeah, on the Facebook page, and you will see a link for UFOs to OMGs. And basically, that is my 3-step process on how I go about designing. So let's jump in. Um, right. So I thank you, Savannah. My last couple posts, I've been standing in my bathroom getting ready. And people seem to love those. So no, Savannah, not in my bathroom for this, although that would be kind of funny if I were. All right. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that the tech works. If there's any problem, do me a favor, just leave it in the comments, like, I can't hear you, or whatever it is that you need to tell me. So, without further ado, let's look at the quilt that broke me. All right, let me switch my. Hold on, I got two. Yes, Brenda, you're the closest one to me, Brenda. Um, you are the closest one to me. Okay, so let me switch. And I think. Alrighty. So here we are. The quilt that broke me is called Oh My Bleeding Heart. And this is the story of that particular quilt. So this is the inspiration. I absolutely love cherry wood fabric. And so I had gotten a big bundle, actually a couple different bundles, and I fell in love with it. As I was scrolling through, I don't know if it was Pinterest or whatever, I came across the picture of the flowers. And that kind of was the initial inspiration as far as the colors that I was looking for. And so when I saw the cherry wood bundle, I was like, that is it. Definitely doing it. Cherry wood, if you're not familiar with it, they're beautiful hand dyed fabrics. Go check it out. So now before I dive into this, there are some background facts that you need to know. I am lazy, right? Not this kind of lazy, not the lie on your couch kind of like, don't want to do anything lazy. I'm this kind of lazy, right? I try and find shortcuts, and sometimes they work and other times they don't. So, with that, I also want to let you know I am not the world's best piecer, all right? Still in search of the perfect 1/4 inch seam. So I typically choose patterns that are simple, and then I'll do elaborate quilting, okay? Now, the next part of my inspiration, I was trying to figure out what to make with this cherry wood fabric. So I delved into my personal digital designs, and I found this that wasn't this, but it part of it, and I modified it, and I knew that those feathers would look spectacular in the cherry wood fabrics. So that's what I decided to do with these cherry wood fabrics. So I decided that I was going to hand applique, which I'd never done before, but I didn't let that scare me. I did quickly fall in love with it. Sadly, I wish I could still do it. My hands don't like it as much as I do anymore. So there's that. Um, and so this piece became the inspiration to my quilt, right? So, yes, it does say 2013. At this point, I had never spent more than a year working on any kind of showpiece before. And something in my brain told me I am definitely going to be at this a little bit longer than a year. So, my design process tends to be a little bit unconventional. And I think if I could just design the whole thing up front and then make it, I might get through it quicker. But anyway, so once I get tired of making a block, whether it's a pieced block or a this particular one, the applique block, I throw the design elements up on my wall, right? So here we have the 4 hand applique blocks that are done, and I literally at this point have no idea where I'm going to go with this next. So I have them up on my wall. So now, no laughing. I was playing around and I was like, okay, let's put these on point. So then I needed something in the middle. And while I loved how this little, and we're stressing little, element looks, I knew that it was much too small for the center of this quilt. Now, remember, I'm lazy and I thought I might be able to make it work. What if I added on to it? No, it really wasn't going to work. Even after playing around with a couple different ideas, I decided, lazy or not, I have got to go back to the drafting table. So I've not done much paper piecing. So leave it in the comments if you are like a paper piecing queen, because let me tell you, I bow down to you because I am not. I literally have to reteach myself how to do it every time I do it, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, this center seems better, but that inside star seems like it's going to be a real pain in my derriere, we'll say, right? But I decided to give it a try to see what it looked like. So here we have the outside portion. That wasn't too bad, again, after I retaught myself how to paper piece. But that inside was so small, it was not fun. And I actually thought once I finished it, I really didn't like it. I thought, that's not really what I want, right? So instead of redrafting and piecing this beauty, I decided I had a brilliant idea. And so let me back up for a second. So I redid that center star. So here it is. It's simpler. It's much better, right? So much happier with the simple star in the center versus the other one. Now, if we go back to this, once I put this on the wall, I still realized that that center star, not the very center one, the one that I repieced, but the actual star was too small. And so normal people will be like, oh, well, we'll just redraft it and go about our business. No, that's not what I decided to do. I decided, brilliant idea, I'm just going to add a border of some sort around that star because surely that's going to be easier, right? So out came my pencil and sketch pad again. And here it is. I was like, this will be the perfect border. Although I do need 4 of these. And then I'm going to figure out how I get to piece those units together, right? I think I can handle the paper piecing of that particular unit. But once I have 4, how do I get it all together, right? And I'm thinking, how hard could it be? I always figure if I like a design enough, I will somehow figure out how to make it work. And honestly, this one was no exception. Whoops, I've got to a flying, I love that. And this one was absolutely no exception. Now, this is when I quickly realized I was in way over my head. I honestly don't know what I was thinking. Clearly, I wasn't thinking. So I pulled my big girl pants on because I knew what needed to be done. And out came the paper piecing skills, or maybe I should say my limited paper piecing skills. And I got it done. But now, if you can see in the picture, I have to figure out how to apply the green pieces. So at this point, I'm thinking, Lisa, you are definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed for thinking that you could successfully piece this together. So I told myself, don't freak out, Lisa, you got this. But in truth, I was seriously freaking out. Now, at this point, I'm again not in my right head. So I'm thinking there's no way, because there's green pieces are still not applied. And I'm like, I just don't know what I'm going to do, right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, let's go to plan B. And at this point, honestly, I didn't have a plan B. There was no plan B. Not good. So I thought, maybe one piece would be easier, right? Okay, I can do this. One piece. This looks promising. And I would hand applique it on after I joined the paper piecing units. Okay, I think I can do this. So there were a ton of trial and errors in the construction of this border. And this part took me, I'm thinking, probably 2 to 3 months, because I would get so frustrated that I would literally have to walk away. Now, I was lucky at this point, you'll see, I had a wide format printer, which I don't have anymore, but I had one. And it was great when I went to go draft things. So I would draft things in Illustrator, and then I would print it off. So that little paper template is what you're seeing. That was what was printed off. Now, the pink in there is actually where I want the green to go. All right, so here we go. I decided to work on the outer edge and get that pieced first, right? So I got the units pieced together. I'm like, okay, so the outer part of that is now done, because I just was really procrastinating on the center. So you can see that I've got my Elmer's glue, which I'm a huge fan of. I love to glue stuff down, and then hand stitch it. Makes it so much easier. But I accomplished that, so I was happy. So with the outer edge pieced, now I had to get back to, how am I going to get the inside done, right? So you will see I added a border onto that star block, and then I cut it to the shape that I needed. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, I can needle turn, I can applique it. Like, what is going to be the easiest way to get it on there, right? So still haven't quite figured that out, because I'm thinking about that stupid green little tiny border, whatever you want to call it. So I thought, okay, instead of trying to do a little small piece, I'm going to do a big piece, right? So what I did was I created that big piece. I turned my edges under, starched them, appliqued it on, and then what I did was I ended up cutting out right? You can faintly see it in the picture, but I have a line where I need to turn it under 2. So I knew I needed to cut it a half an inch away and then kind of turn that under. And so that's what this is. I'm like, okay, I got this. I can do it. And it actually ended up working. I did have to pin it all along on the way, and felt a little bit like a voodoo doll, but I got it done. At this point, it literally took me about 3 to 4 months to finish just the center of this quilt. And phew, but I did it. I finally accomplished it. Now, at this point, I did end up setting it aside, because I just couldn't, I didn't know where I was going with it. I was super like frustrated at this point. I wasn't thrilled with the way the everything came together. It wasn't perfect, but literally nothing is perfect. So, but I was upset. So, after regaining some confidence, I decided, okay, time to move forward. My next challenge again was figuring out where to go. And what better way than to throw up all of the elements onto the design wall, and maybe that quilt would speak to me. But no, mine don't. So you're going to see, like you can see, there's a couple things up there that I created, that aren't in the quilt. But me being lazy, I kept looking at it thinking, how can I get that little star to work? How can I get the other element to work in this quilt? Because then I didn't have to make as many, right? Because I already had those done. So then I had this epiphany. I was like, ooh, that would look really cool. Um, and in my head, I'm thinking, can I execute it? After the challenge of the center, I was definitely doubtful. So along came more paper piecing, but I had this idea that I wanted part of the star to have the yellowish border, and the other part of the star to have the pink border. So that's what I got. Again, not the easiest thing in the world, and I'm definitely not the world's best piecer, but it was done. So I was pretty darn happy. So then I thought, okay, this worked. Again, I added that same little center star, to the center of those borders. Um, and about this time, I'm realizing that I needed to do some fabric shopping. And for those that know me, know that I do not have a large stash at all. So I thought, okay, let's do the shopping trip. And I opted for a virtual one. So I knew I wanted a print border. Um, which is funny because at this point I didn't even know what the border was going to look like. I just thought, okay, let me get the fabric and maybe that will help me make some decisions. Or maybe I was just procrastinating. I probably did thread shopping in there as well, for sure. So I obtained the border fabric, and it was the easiest part of the quilt. I called my friend in Tennessee who owned a shop at the time, and with her help, we picked out this perfect fabric. Somebody remind me if I'm ever in this position again, just to buy the whole bolt, especially when you don't know what you're going to be doing with it, because it's very limiting. Um, so, so I've got my border fabric now. So I was not prepared for the borders aside from having the fabric. So I'm really hoping at this point that the quilt speaks to me. Nope, no talking going on, which is not surprising because my quilts don't talk to me. So out came my pencil and paper again. And while I'm at it, why not add more handwork, right? I know I like the handwork. So here you'll see me adding again this little tiny green, I guess, border, right? Piping border, to my quilt. So At this point in the construction, I'm realizing like this is now my most favorite quilt ever. I've never spent this much time on a quilt in my entire life. Um, all of the blood, sweat, and tears that literally has gone into it. And I haven't even finished the top yet, let alone gotten to the quilting. So I am happy with how that's looking. So I decide on my border, and now I have my finished top. And I'm thinking that was really rough, very very rough. Um, so now a much needed break was in order. The construction of the top was more intricate than any of the past quilts that I've ever done. And since it's my favorite, I'm going to tell you, truth be told, I was really afraid of ruining the quilt with the quilting. So do me a favor and like in the comments, like let me know, have you had that one quilt where you're truly terrified to quilt because you do not want to ruin it? I know I'm not alone in that, but that's where I was. So after putting it away for some time, I was feeling refueled, recharged, and it was time for my divide and design to commence. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with this, it is the process that I go through with all of my quilts to determine how it will be quilted. Now, if you're interested in that process, you can go to my website and follow the link to the free webinar that I mentioned in the very beginning, UFOs to OMGorgeous, where I do outline the entire process. Now, being the lazy quilter that I am, I do try to avoid marking a quilt, but sometimes it's necessary for the design, right? And so the design that I wanted, I thought, okay, I have to mark. I use a blue washout marker. I think the one is by Collins. It has a nice fine point, and it's the only washout marker that I use. Now, as I'm quilting, I'm thinking this is turning out much better than I'd hoped, despite the known issues in the piecing, right? I'm loving it. So I'm so impatient. I can't wait to see what it looks like without all the blue markings. So I grab my handy spray bottle and I start to get working on getting rid of the ugly blue. I couldn't believe my eyes. My poor, beautiful quilt. I had done everything right. I had pre-washed, all of that. So despite doing everything correctly, my darkest pink bled. So after what seemed like days of crying, and seriously questioning my quilting capabilities, I was really ready to throw in the towel. Like I had never felt so defeated because at this point I am years into this quilt. Okay. Defeated it just doesn't even come close. So after a lot of soul searching, I really just decided that I was going to move forward with my so-called masterpiece. And I worked tirelessly each day, gradually making progress. Now, due to other commitments, this quilt was on and off the frame numerous times. So when you look at the picture in the lower right-hand corner, you will see it is basted. I will never do that again. Um, just won't. I need to work through the entire quilt, and that's just my preferred way to go. So I will never baste the quilt again. Anyway, so there was huge obstacles in the quilting, and frogging my sand stipple is not something I would ever like to repeat. That was no fun, but I knew it had to be done. So finally the time came and the quilting was complete. Certainly not without some bumps in the road. And sadly, there was no rejoicing as usual because the dreaded bleed still needed to be dealt with, right? So after getting information from everyone and their mother, I ultimately decided to follow Vicki Welsh's method of removing a bleed. So Vicky's a dyer, so I figured she knows what she's talking about. So then I thought, if I can't get the bleed out, I'm just going to put the sleeve on the front and submit this quilt as a whole cloth because I think the back looks pretty darn good. Okay, so some things to remember, right? If we looked at the quilt, I used a lot of that dark pink in the top, a lot. And it's all going to bleed once I get it wet. So I decided I better use the big tub. And I was so nervous. Like, is this actually going to work? Or am I going to ruin the entire quilt and have wasted the last 5 years? So Dawn dish detergent to the rescue. So at this point, I've got it submerged in my big tub. I've got Tupperware in there because the whole quilt has to be in and underneath the water, right? So at this point, I'm thinking I completely ruined the quilt. There's no turning back. There was no way that the water could be that pink and not transfer onto that yellow fabric. Since the water was still really pink, I decided that I would drain it and redo it. So this is round 2, where the water is slightly less pink. So I'm thinking, okay, we're working through this. Again, have no idea if once it's all laid out and dried, if it's going to work. So this was the last soak. This is what the water looked like. So just a slight tinge in the pink. But I'm going to tell you, it definitely was nerve-wracking. So while I wasn't sure of the outcome, right, I knew that I would complete the quilt that used my favorite cherry wood fabric. I named it Oh My Bleeding Heart because I truly poured my heart and soul into this imperfect piece. Now, you can't see it here, but if you look closely, you can still see a tiny bit of the bleed around the star. But for the most part, it definitely came out. It went to a couple shows. It did okay. And now it just lives in my house. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. But that is the quilt that literally broke me. It was my last show quilt. Haven't done another one since. And honestly, I keep saying I'm going to, but I just don't know if I have it in me anymore to actually do that. So yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Jury's still out as to whether or not. I always sit here and the sun comes beaming in at this time of day. I'm waiting for the time change. So that is the quilt that broke me. And it's interesting because when I sent the email out this morning as a reminder that I was doing this today, I got a couple emails back and people were emailing me pictures of the quilts that ultimately broke them. And, it's always nice to know that you aren't the only one that has those quilts. I learned a lot from that particular quilt. And I just learned a lot about myself, not necessarily my quilting, but that my perseverance and getting it done. And I knew that if the bleeding hadn't come out and it was ruined, that at least like I could use it in my teaching, right? I could use it as an example of what not to do. But anyway, so now I treat my hand dyes much differently. And granted that this was a while ago, and Cherrywood doesn't use that particular dye anymore apparently. But yeah, so I treat my hand dyes much differently. Now they get washed in the sink with Dawn dishwashing detergent, and I wash them until they run clean, so that I don't have that problem. Now, just a quick, not so funny story. It went off to a show. I saw it at said show. It didn't hang great, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to block it again. So I blocked it and it bled yet again. So, literally 3 days before I needed to send it to Houston, um, and I was leaving to go to Switzerland to go to Bernina, I am trying to get the bleed out yet again. So, one of the comments that one of the judges had given me was that it looked like it had been washed a couple times, which it kind of had. So, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to scroll real quick through comments. I know I kept you kind of longer than I normally do, but yeah. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through. If you guys have questions, just pop them into the comments. I see both the YouTube comments and the Facebook comments. So let's see. Oh, I think our furthest away is in Austria. Etta, hello, hello. Yay, love that. Okay, hold on. I'm still scrolling. Still scrolling. So, okay, so we have some paper piecing people. Yes. Yeah. I like it. The one thing I don't like is I don't like to rip the paper out. That is like my least fun job at all. So I have done Sharon Schomburg's paperless paper piecing. Huge fan. Love that. Um, Yes, Linda. So Linda had a quilt that she didn't like the quilting in it, and so she just spent a whole bunch of time ripping out that entire quilt and is going to requilt it. So yeah, I know you know what I'm talking about, girl. um, oh, let's see. Okay. Oh, thank you, Anne. I do love the quilt. I do love the quilt. Was this quilt lost at some point in transit? Absolutely gorgeous quilt, and your quilting. Oh, thank you, Elaine. I don't remember if this was one. I don't think this one was one of the ones that was lost in transit. So I was doing a trunk show and teaching in Canada, and so I shipped literally all of my quilts, and they got lost. Hmm. I ultimately did get them back after emailing the CEO of UPS, but no, I don't think, Elaine, that this particular one was one of them. Um, oh, thank you. You guys are so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. And Vicky says that she would not have any hair left. Well, I'm telling you, it definitely aged me tremendously, and I think that all of my gray hair, while I like to say it's my kids, I think that it might have been this quilt. Yeah. I know, and everybody's talking about the freezer paper piecing, that it's a game changer. So I definitely need to investigate that if I ever decide to go the paper piecing route again. Um, yeah, I'm not sure about that. So, anyway, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to listen to the quilt that broke me. Again, I love doing these, so I'm always kind of like, what topic am I gonna do? If you have any suggestions, shoot me an email, leave it in the comments. I'm also doing a whole bunch now on TikTok and Instagram as far as reels. So you can go watch me post from my bathroom and talk about UFOs. So, all right, you guys, peace out. Have an awesome day. I leave tomorrow for Florida and I'm hoping that I feel better. If not, I'm going to sit in the sun and let it bake this stuff out. So, have an awesome day. See you guys.